Guys, Kempo back here again. It's time for another old new review. This time I've finally finished all three original Lord of the Rings books. This was a present to me, and they're like there was like a certain edition. But yeah, I've the way I tackled this was I'll read the first book, and then I'll read like comic books and other stuff in between. Then read the next book. Same thing in comic books in between. So I've actually got this as a Christmas present last year from my wife, and it's something I've kind of started doing the last year or two. Is that books I've always wanted to read when I was younger, because I read a lot of non-fiction books when I was younger, and I was always intimidated by size and the thickness of these books. That I was always put off by it. I thought I was too slow reader, this and that. Then eventually got off my own horse, my own backside, and started reading these books finally. And anyways, old new review. I love the movies. I'm coming from a movie perspective first, and now I'm reading all the books. I gotta say, I absolutely loved it. Once I got past that initial stages when you're reading the books and you're getting used to getting used to how it's written. Like, Sam could never describe in words nor picture clearly to himself what he felt or thought that night, though it remained in his memory as one of the chief events of his life. Like, the way it is described and how the story is told is it's so different to the movies. The movies do a fantastic job, and you can clearly see it. But you can see in the books, there is so much more to the stories, and there's a lot of characters and segments left out of the movies. But there's only so much you can do in movies without going on and on, dragging too long. But that also, now saying that, it makes you want to see the full story. And reading the book, it's like you see the full story and you understand why characters make certain decisions. Because in the movies you're wondering, why don't they just dig the ring in a hole, or give it to someone who's going to keep it safe, or throw it in the ocean, as an example. And in the council, in the first book, they explain why they don't do that. They're like, okay, well, there are creatures in the ocean that serve Sauron. They'll eventually give it to Sauron. You can't dig in the hole because the ring will actually call to the forces of Mordor. And I was so sad, because I'll start with the Fellowship. Like, Tom Bombadil, one of the wizards, the 5 wizards in the Lord of the Rings stories. There's this whole couple of chapters and segment with Tom Bombadil, and I thought he was such a good character, so interesting. He could grab the ring, and he just doesn't care. It has no sway on him at all, the ring. And he's just, the way he spoke, and so interesting. And now he's actually representing the Rings of Power show. It's actually quite interesting how they're doing it. But I thought he was such a good character, and reading about him, and then thinking about the movie, because a lot of the time I was picturing what part we're up to in the book through the movie scenes, and then you can clearly see there's massive segues, and you're like, oh wow, none of that happens in the movie when you realize that. But even there's parts where Frodo and the 4 hobbits are on the road trying to escape the Nazguls before Weathertop. They're just out of the Shire, and they meet a bunch of elves and they talk to them. And I think the way the books get, especially the Fellowship, gets really well done is a first-hand character's perspective of these events going on around him. Like, this massive problem is going around them, and they're trying to understand, take into terms in the grip of what the actual gravity of what's going on, and they're describing through their eyes exactly what's going on around them. Like, this thing was gross and disgusting. And they try describing it, but they don't fully understand what it is. And they really explain their feelings and how they get through certain situations. characters they meet. Every conversation in the books, especially Fellowship, are much longer. So when they first meet Aragorn, they call him Strider in the movie and the book. The conversation in the bar is quite short in the movie, but in the book it's quite long, and it explains what he's doing here. Aragorn's trying to be explaining why they're in danger, why they should listen to him, and it just really goes to that character perspective. Okay, so I think the first movie was my favorite, and I think the first book is probably my favorite. Although the third one was fantastic as well, but I do think the first one is my favorite. Then you come to the Two Towers. The Two Towers, shorter than the others, and the way they go through this book is not like the movie where the movie goes scene to scene with the characters. Like 1 minute you're watching Frodo go through a certain part of the Southlands trying to get into Mordor, and then you're not switching to Gandalf and Aragorn and the crew there. This goes through, at least with this book, the first half is Aragorn and trying to find Pippin and Merry, and then discovering Gandalf's back, going to Rohan, defending Rohan, Battle of Helm's Deep. All that's in the first half of the book, and Pippin getting raced off to Minas Tirith. Second half is Frodo and Sam and discovering Gollum, finding a way into Mordor, and towards the end of the book, they get betrayed by Gollum and put in Shelob's lair. So all that's in the second half of the book. Did I enjoy reading it that way? For me, probably yes, because if it was switching back and forth, I think for me reading it and how the writing style is of Tolkien's, it made it easier and more cohesive for me to understand what was going on at the time by just putting both halves of their stories into it. And I already knew at the end of the day the end result of the story. Like, I know they're gonna win the battle at the end of the day. That I know Frodo and Sam are gonna get into Mordor. So there was nothing that didn't ruin any climax for me. It was more seeing the details. One massive thing I noticed in the second book is how Saruman doesn't get killed. He is just locked in jail from there by Treebeard. I love the conversations with Treebeard. He was probably my favourite character in the Two Towers. He was just the way he talks, the way he moves, the way he speaks, how he explains why there's no women Ents, and he's saying how they can't find them, and just talks about their relationship with Isengard before and now, and I thought he was the best character in the Two Towers. And then you come to Return of the King. This one was a lot thicker, but with this book there was an appendix towards the end that explained the lineages of Lord of the Rings, like humans, Númenóreans, Danes, folk of the dwarves. Anyway, Return of the King. I just finished this yesterday. Amazing ending, honestly, amazing ending. Going through the characters' perspectives and all. I loved how Aragorn's perspective in this one was probably one of my favorites, and how each part. One thing I'll go quick side note. One thing I've loved about the books as well is it explains the depth of time between certain events. Like, for example, Moria in the first book, they're like in there for at least a month. Like I think it says 2 weeks to a month. They're trying to search a way out, which in the movie doesn't really show that. It's just they're in there, they get caught, they're out, which is like, which I really enjoy about the books. Same with this. They're talking about how they need to fight Sauron after Minas Tirith, the Battle of Minas Tirith, and they need to get to it. So they explain the travel on the way, the battles on the way through getting to Mordor. And I just thought that was really interesting, and describing how Rohan come to Minas Tirith's aid. I think I loved the Hobbits and Aragorn the most in the third book, because Aragorn is just talking how he's not trying to take over Minas Tirith. He's like, I'll let the people make the decision. I'm just here to help. And he was trying to heal, and he's like, and people just finally recognize him. I enjoyed I enjoyed how the hobbits, especially towards the end, the hobbits. There's one big thing I didn't know that they don't have in the movies is that when the hobbits come back to the Shire, the whole troubles in Shire, these bandits, these ruffians come and they take over, and it's up to the four hobbits to save the Shire. And I love it. It just shows their heroism and how they changed at the books, because they don't show it in the movies at all. It shows how the hobbits round up the rest of the Shire and they fight back against ruffians, and it's like shows how they become a warrior spirit, and it's amazing. And then you find out the head leader bandit is Saruman, and how he's still trying to manipulate, he's still trying to gain power, and Frodo still spares him, but it was Wormtongue that then kills him then. I just thought that was such a poetic ending, and it shows how Frodo tried to stay in the Shire. He was there for a whole year after everything happened, and he was like, look, I can't be here any longer. Soul is just wounded and corrupted, so he goes with Gandalf and Elrond and the rest to the Grey Havens, and I thought that was very poetic. And how Sam and Pippin and Merry how ties off their loose ends, and just fantastic ending. Overall, if you have never read the books and you've always wanted to, or you felt intimidated, just read the books. Just do it. Just take it slow. Don't think you're going to need to understand every single detail, because he does write very vaguely. There was a lot of things I didn't understand, but I enjoyed reading anyway. Read at your own pace. Highly recommend it. Like, these are the classic stories of Tolkien and the classic books of fantasy, where all fantasy stories came from. So I think there's a great, if you're into stories and you're into how people derive fantasy stories from, or just the whimsical story sense in the events that take place, are just fantastic. I highly recommend it. Easily 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 when it comes to fantasy storytelling. That is all I've got to say for now, guys. Thank you as always, and I'll catch you in the next one.